Hey everyone, I am here today with Kyler Nunnery. Kyler is the talented mind behind Butter Coding, which is a software that is designed to ease the pains of E&M by integrating AI. So Butter not only suggests what codes to use, but it tells you why it recommends those codes. And it includes lots of references to the coding guidelines, and it highlights parts in the medical record that helps back up its decision of why it wants to select that level. He's here today to talk to us about how programs like these are developed and how they are going to transform some of our work. So, Kyler, thank you so much for coming on to the channel to talk to us today about AI medical coding programs.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be here. And I just want to say that, thanks for publishing all the videos. Congratulations on the success of the channel. You're really like the on-ramp to the profession for a lot of people.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, I want to start here. Can you explain how your AI software specifically supports medical coding tasks and processes?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll start with just a quick explanation of what it is. It is Butter Coding is medical coding focused initially on E&M coding. Those are the majority of encounters, and with some procedure coding to come down the road. And what it is simply text coming in and medical codes coming out, but it's a coding assist tool to help guide the coder and help them do their job in a faster. So on as far as how we do that, I was thinking that it would be good to show a little bit of ChatGPT is a core piece of this, and I wanted to show a
Right.
little bit more about how ChatGPT handles some of these situations. So let me
Yes.
share my screen. Okay, great. So I'm sure a lot of your users at this point have heard of ChatGPT. Probably fewer of them have used it, and they've probably formed some opinions on it. So just showing how it actually works, I think, would be helpful to understand a little bit about how we've built our software. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste a medical record into ChatGPT directly, and this is something that anyone can access. And we paste that in, and we just say, for this medical record, which is a 6-month follow-up for coronary artery disease, what E&M level would you code for it, and why? And almost as quickly as I can paste that in, it comes up with an answer for that, and it comes up with 99214, which happens to be the correct code for this chart. So, a lot of people would see that and say, wow, this is ChatGPT may be the solution to medical coding, but it really is not. There are a lot of ways that it falls down, a lot of limitations to it, but you can't dismiss it entirely because it's a really powerful tool that allows, I think of it as a sort of a thinking engine that allows our software to answer specific questions related to medical coding. So at the core of our engine is ChatGPT, but we don't just ask it the high level, what's the code, because it doesn't get that right. And in fact, here, just did a quick survey of some medical records and compared what ChatGPT came up with versus what the expected one was. And even though this first sample gets it right, it falls down on a lot of others. Either it says it's somewhere in this range, or it gets the service incorrect. Because it's not actually following specific rules. All it's doing is trying to predict what the next word is in its answer. And so that can sometimes get the right answer, but not always. And it's not something that you can rely on in a production environment.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the data that ChatGPT has been fed isn't up to date as of like this week. It's the last data that it has is from a couple years ago. So it might not know anything about the E&M changes that were implemented in 2023 because it doesn't have that data into it.
Yeah, that's right. And even it will eventually, of course, get updated. But even once it's updated, it's still not sufficient to just ask it the questions, because there's no guarantee that it's going through all the logical steps that have been laid out by the AMA to come to the right conclusion. So our software leverages ChatGPT to answer more narrow and specific questions, and then we combine the answers with hard-coded business rules so that we can guarantee, it's sort of guardrails for the technology. Let me just illustrate that with another run of ChatGPT. So if I take that same medical record, but instead of asking it what are a high-level question, I can ask it a much more specific question. I can say, for the following medical record, is the CAD an acute condition or a chronic one? There we go. Okay. So it's much better at answering these kinds of questions where it says, okay, in this case, it's a chronic condition. And it's even better at answering those questions if you give it examples or you give it guidelines and you say, here's what the definition, as far as the AMA sees it, of what a chronic condition is. The accuracy level is much higher for some of those narrow questions. So we put together those questions and then we process the results. We combine those with business logic, and the result is what you see here. So it says for that same medical record, the CPT code is a 99214. How we came to that is that it was a moderate level of severity for problems addressed and a moderate level of severity for the risk. And for the problems addressed, it matched for 2 or more stable chronic problems addressed. And you can further drill down on that to see the details and see, okay, the 2 chronic stable conditions that it found were coronary artery disease and dyspnea. You can also then click on coronary artery disease and the system will highlight in the medical record and show you where it's drawing that conclusion from, which is really helpful. You know, if it's some of the AI tools of a few years ago were not explainable. Like, so it could tell you what the answer was, but it wouldn't be able to tell you why it had that answer.
Right.
And so, that's really the high level on what this tool is and how it's put together. What else can I tell you about it?
Yeah. What kind of training, what kind of data does it have to be fed in order for it to perform accurate medical coding?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So AI in years past depended heavily on lots of data, lots of domain-specific data, because you were really training a neural network from scratch. It knew how to do nothing when you started, and so you have to feed it lots of examples for it to get the answer right. In this case, this is ChatGPT, which has been trained on the majority of the internet. So it's already trained and has some understanding of language and different subjects. So the game shifts a little bit to, instead of getting lots of training data, it's about getting the right prompts to type in. So you can't pass in the entire CPT guideline book. You can just pass in a little bit of data. And so the trick is finding the right data to pass into that prompt, the right examples to give it to increase the accuracy. And maybe go ahead.
It is kind of garbage in, garbage out, correct? So if you feed it incorrect data, it's going to give you incorrect answers. If you tell it that the correct way to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is to use ham and cheese, it will insist to you that the correct way to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is to use ham and cheese, right?
That's a great example. Yeah, it definitely is. And so the guidelines that you pass to it, the prompts that you send into it before you ask the question are really critical to the performance of the engine. Maybe if I can infer a little bit from that question, like usually when people are asking about what training data, the question behind that question is really like, what is the accuracy of the engine? Like how much can you trust it? Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So on that front, so we've put together this engine. It works great for the sample data that we have, but we understand that the user needs to have trust in the system. They need to understand that this is going to do a good job and guide them to the right answer. And so we're building out a library of sample medical records, which currently we have about 200 E&M medical records, which are part of a larger set of about 5,000 medical records that have been anonymized. And we're in the process of assigning proper codes to all of those, and then we'll use that as our check. Because as we refine, we may refine a prompt and tweak it to say, take that acute or chronic question that I just asked it. What we found with a couple medical records was it said in the text, this is acute on chronic. And the engine said, okay, this is a chronic condition. But we know that acute on chronic is really acute. And so we refine the prompt to say, and by the way, acute on chronic should be considered acute. When we make those changes to the prompt, we may fix one thing, but break others.
Yeah.
And so having a big set of samples that we can continuously run through the engine and measure the results against what is expected helps us build a much more reliable tool. And that's also something that we're going to publish. So we understand that transparency is at the heart of trust. And so allowing users to see the actual results, the good, bad, and the ugly, and see the progress over time of the engine will build into that level of trust.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like right now you're kind of concentrating on sections of a time. Again, you said you can't like feed the entire code book to it. So, to program the AI for tens of thousands of codes is not going to be like a quick, like we just load the data in and it can start the ball rolling. It's almost like segmental. You have to go, okay, well, here's how you do cardiology, and then we're going to have to really fine tune cardiology. And then, okay, now we've got that down. Let's move on to digestive stuff. Okay, we're going to feed it a million pieces of data about digestive reports. So is that kind of how it progresses with these sort of programs?
Yeah. Our initial start is with E&M, and we've got that working pretty well, at least in the outpatient setting. And then we continue to branch out, and we focus on ED, and we focus on prolonged services and critical care, and things that work a little bit differently. And then we expand into different specialties. So urology is the first specialty on our list, and then we'll continue from there.
So what are some of the primary advantages of using AI in medical coding versus just a team of medical coders, the traditional method?
Yeah. We see the advantages as really making the coders faster at their job, making them more efficient, allowing them to code more charts in less time, and hopefully with higher accuracy.
Yeah.
I would say broadly speaking, this tool works a little bit differently than some of the others. Like the encoders, I would consider sort of encyclopedias, or their lookup tools. This kind of flips that on its head. It's where you can just pass it the medical record, and you don't have to go hunting and pecking through some of these systems to find the right business rules. This will bring those to the forefront, allow you to make the right decision. So I see that as some of the primary advantages.
And as far as like the limitations, so what are some of the primary limitations, some of the primary challenges that we're seeing as we're building out these AI programs, and that what things should medical coders be aware of too? Because we also don't want the coders to become, oh, well, I'm just going to kind of tune out and just click, yeah, that looks good, and and the AI and just send everything out that the AI suggests.
Yeah, I mean, the tools. I would liken the tools to like a self-driving car. Self-driving cars can do pretty impressive things, but you still have to keep your hands on the wheel.
Yeah.
And that's very much the case in this situation. For example, there are a lot of things that a coder does that is implicit, that they don't even know that they're doing. But when you sit down and you try and write a program to do the same thing, you realize what some of those things are. Like, for example, you may have a medical record that has two encounters in it. And the AI is not going to raise its hand and say, oh, wait a second, this is a second encounter. Or you may have a medical record that has the history, and the AI is not going to know, oh, wait, that section is the history instead of part of the encounter in the medical decision making. And so it will get better over time, but you still need to have your hands on the wheel, and you need to validate what it's telling you.
Yeah, and I think there's still, because I was just talking with some of I work in a co-working space, so we were having lunch with the other business people that work in the co-working space yesterday, and it seems like there's, a lot of concerns about AI in various industries, and we have even people who are saying, you know what, someone said, I as a child, was dreaming about when we would have cars that would drive themselves, and I wouldn't have to drive myself. But she's like, now that I see the cars and some of the issues going on with them, she's like, I would rather just drive the car myself. And I think we will still see that in the industry. Some people who are like, you know what, I know this tech exists, it looks great, but maybe for me and my specialty, it's not for me. Or some people that buy different packages that maybe, do different things. So I feel that, it's not going to be this wide sweeping thing. We will still see people, especially in healthcare, that are reluctant to take on technologies. I mean, I always use the comparison. We're still using fax machines to fax things back and forth to the insurance company. So healthcare is not always the swiftest at adopting new technology and letting go of other things. So I think we will still continue to see some reluctancy, maybe even in regards to, some of the security measures and things that people might have that in the back of their mind, which, is a valid concern to have. So does your software integrate with any electronic healthcare systems or any like coding platforms and things that we are currently using in healthcare?
Yes, we integrate with Epic currently to pull the medical records. So any medical record that the login has access to from within Epic, we can pull the medical record over and process that in our system. We have more integrations planned. We have tighter integrations planned. And right now, I would expect, probably initial users to just copy and paste the medical record into the system from wherever they get it. But we understand that the more we can streamline the process, the more adoption we'll get.
Yeah, especially working with Epic because that's one of the biggest EHRs out there. And so many of the large healthcare systems use it. I can imagine if they're able to just integrate things. That's awesome. Was there like a certain security kind of clearance that you had to go to work and get that integrated with Epic?
There's actually there was a law passed in the U.S. called USCDI, which was meant to empower greater access into the medical record, primarily aimed at patients, like giving patients access, but it also stipulated some of the specs for getting into the system and standardizing some of those specs. And so when we conform to that spec, that actually gets us access in. And so it's relatively turnkey. What it is not right now is tight integration with like the work list that they have or the work queue that they have.
Oh yeah.
And so as we get access to more of those systems and have partnerships form, then we'll tighten that integration.
That's awesome. And then, I know one of the concerns that people have too is they're like, oh, I don't want the AI program to read the medical record and then it winds up in the cloud somewhere. Are there current regulations surrounding that? Because I know the government, again, is also not always swift with making modifications based off of upcoming technologies.
Yeah. There was a concern for a while because ChatGPT was using all of the data sent to it to train, but they've since changed some of their privacy policies and storage policies. Additionally, Microsoft, who invested $15 billion in ChatGPT or in OpenAI, they not too long ago announced that they have a HIPAA compliant version of ChatGPT, and so that's what we use.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. I love to hear that. So, how do you kind of envision the future of AI in medical coding? Are there like upcoming advancements or developments that we should be anticipating?
Um, it's changing very quickly. There are lots of language models coming out that are pushing the state of the art, that are getting faster and cheaper. I guess specifically, the amount of text that you can pass in the prompt is increasing.
Yeah.
And so that will, if we can pass in the whole chapter in the AMA book and then let it make its decision according to that, then it's going to have a better result. I would say more broadly, though, I think of it in terms of like the impact for the full revenue cycle,
Mhm.
because I think we're going to see this start to play out in several places in the revenue cycle. Namely, I think summarization, like actually writing the chart note itself, based on transcription and there's a field called ambient listening where there will actually be a microphone in the exam room,
Mm.
with permission, of course, and obviously you have to jump through the permission and HIPAA hoops there, but those tools will help summarize the medical record, further upstream. And then there will be downstream uses as well. We're working on an automated denial appeal letter based on the same data,
Yeah.
that we pull out for the billing. So you'll start to see it more and more places. I think the furthest off in this domain for AI is for actually diagnosing, like actually being the
Oh,
doctor, giving the conclusion. That stuff obviously is much more sensitive. The bar has to be much higher on that, and that's going to
yeah.
be many years out.
That would be wild to me if I was sitting in the room with my doctor and my doctor said, this is your BMI and you need to lose weight. And then I go home and start getting advertisements based off of the computer in the room was listening and it started feeding me things when I get home.
Yeah,
Because you know how that goes. Like you say something about like, oh, I haven't been to the beach in a while. And then next thing you know,
that's
you're on your
totally.
Facebook feed and it starts feeding you like all of these different beach resorts that you want to.
Totally. We did that experiment. We were at dinner the other night with some friends and we're like, all right, we're going to talk about pink wallpaper for 5 minutes and no one can search it and we'll see if it shows up on our feeds. So far no pink wallpaper advertisements, but I definitely, privacy is of course hugely important in this space, which is why, the vendors that are building these models understand that, and they're sectioning this off. Just to give you a feel, I came from a couple different verticals, and I did a stint in government and selling software to government, and the government uses some of these same services. Like they have their own AWS cloud that the CIA even uses. So,
Oh, wow.
if you think about sensitive data, state
Yeah.
secrets held by the CIA,
Mhm.
those are held in the cloud right now. So the tools are there.
So, of course, the big question then on everyone's mind is how do you address the concerns regarding job displacement or the role of the human coders in the context of these AI medical coding tools?
Yeah, that is the elephant in the room sometimes. Um, what I would say about that is, first of all, this is a coding assist tool. This is not a coder replacement tool. This is something to help coders do their job better, faster, more efficiently. If we can 5x the number of charts that they can code, then instead of coding for one physician practice, then they're going to be able to code for 5 physician practices. Second, I would say currently there are signs of a labor shortage, in lots of different domains. Medical coding is no exception. I spoke with a colleague at one of Florida's largest health networks, and they were saying, we just can't get enough coders. Like we can't get enough people to do this job because our consumption is going up. We're in Florida, and so the aging demographic, and we can't find enough people to code this stuff. And that's not to mention all the other challenges that are faced in RevCycle. Like if you have an office where you're getting denials and those denials are being neglected
Mm,
and the term is expiring and that's completely lost revenue. So
yeah.
so we think that if we can improve the efficiency of medical coders, then that allows them to focus on more strategic things, things that can impact the bottom line a little bit more directly. I think a lot of people think about the task at hand and the labor as like a fixed thing, like it's a pie. And if
Mm,
AI starts to take some of the pieces of the pie and there's none left for us, then what are we going to do? You know? But I don't see it that way. And I think there's evidence that that's not how it is, that if we can make coders more efficient, then that opens up new kinds of tasks, that opens up new kinds of work that ultimately have the goal of reducing costs and letting physicians do the job of doctors. So, I would say until there's 100% of charges are captured and 100% of abstracts are accurate and compliant with policies and you know doctor you're not just checking anecdotal a few charts here and there from Dr. Smith, but instead you're using tools to check all the charts, all the self-coding from Dr. Smith or whatever the situation is. Until you don't have any denials or any collections and OIG closes its door because there's nothing else to audit, like there's always going to be a
yeah, I
job
don't
for
know.
people in this space. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really fascinated with seeing how it's going to transform medical coding and how we might need to have some more clinical knowledge and have a higher level of understanding of these things because again, you can't verify the prompts that AI is giving you unless you have an understanding of what is behind that. If you go and read through the guidelines and go, oh yeah, or oh yeah, no, this isn't correct, or they missed something, you have to understand it. And even so, we still want to continue to verify and check and make sure that things okay. Even like you said, keeping your hands on the steering wheel. It's even if the things are going right out the door at 100% accuracy, we'll probably still want to check every so many charts to make sure that things are still looking correctly. Because even with the medical record systems and automations that we have now, things will get trapped in a work queue somewhere that no one knows about. Things happen. Someone doesn't update, and we don't realize down the line that something else was affected. So yeah, I think there's definitely I'm very excited to see the transformation that's going to happen over the next few years. I want to thank you so much for coming on here. I think this was a lot of really great information. It was super informative. And you can find out more about buttercoding at buttercoding.com. Is there anywhere else that my viewers could find out more information about your program and your company?
yeah, the website is a great spot. We're setting up our LinkedIn profile right now. I'll also say if you want to test out the software, we've got a beta waitlist on the website, so you can sign up and get early access to that. We're also looking for feedback on this, feedback on the accuracy of the tool as well as the roadmap that we have laid out.
Yeah, that was a lot of great information. So again, thank you so much, Kyler, for coming on the channel today. You can find out more about buttercoding at buttercoding.com.